That's, but by far, my most lucrative career came as a WWE wrestler. So, sit down, join me as I tell you all about how I made and burnt through an entire fortune.
Under the bright lights, where pyrotechnics explode and fans scream for their heroes, wrestling looks like a world built on glory and gold. The entrances are grand, the paychecks are huge, and the characters larger than life. But when the final bell rings and the crowd fades into silence, reality returns. Behind every persona lies a human being, fragile, fallible, and often broken by the very spectacle they helped build. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on 5 men who defined the industry, and lost everything in the process. Their names once echoed through arenas: Ric Flair, Scott Hall, Lex Luger, Perry Saturn, and Dave Bautista. Their stories are not just about money. They're about identity, excess, addiction, redemption, and the high cost of fame. Ric Flair, the man who became his own character. Few names in wrestling are as legendary, or as tragic, as Ric Flair. For decades, he wasn't just a performer, he was a lifestyle. The Nature Boy didn't end when the cameras turned off. He was a living embodiment of extravagance: custom robes, Rolex watches, private jets, champagne every night. Limousine ridin', jet flyin', kiss stealin', wheelin' dealin', son of a gun, wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a mission statement. But behind the glitter was a man slowly drowning in his own myth. Richard Flair, the man behind the character, disappeared somewhere along the way. Flair became a victim of his own performance. He didn't just act like a man who lived beyond his means, he truly did. Every dollar he earned vanished in the pursuit of maintaining that image. He once said, "If I made $1 million, I spent 2. And that wasn't a joke. His financial destruction was slow but relentless. By 1990, he owed the IRS hundreds of thousands in back taxes. By 2004, the debt had ballooned to nearly $2 million. For divorces later, he was drowning in alimony and legal fees. One judge issued a warrant for his arrest over $30,000 in unpaid support. He founded Ric Flair Finance in 2007, a business meant to capitalize on his name, but it collapsed within a year. Even Vince McMahon, his longtime boss, lent him nearly $800,000 to stay afloat. Flair admitted his retirement match with Shawn Michaels wasn't for glory, it was to pay Vince back. Hulk Hogan also bailed him out during his son's health crisis. A man who had once represented wealth and power was now scraping by through energy drinks, cameos, and merchandise deals. The tragedy of Ric Flair is that he never stopped being the Nature Boy. The act consumed him entirely. In the end, the persona outlived the man, and the man was left chasing an illusion that had already bankrupted him. Scott Hall, the bad guy who couldn't escape himself. If Ric Flair was a man devoured by excess, Scott Hall was one destroyed by demons. Known to millions as Razor Ramon, the swaggering bad guy with the gold chains and Cuban accent, Hall redefined cool in professional wrestling. His charisma was magnetic, his matches iconic. His jump to WCW in 1996 changed the business forever, igniting the Monday Night Wars. But behind the shades and the tooth shattered by trauma. In 1983, while working as a bouncer, he got into an altercation outside a bar and fatally shot a man. It was ruled self-defense, but the guilt followed him forever. He once admitted, "I couldn't sleep. I saw his face every night." That trauma became the seed of a lifelong addiction. Alcohol, painkillers, and cocaine became coping mechanisms. The success he found in the ring only fueled the addiction. More fame meant more access, more money, more drugs. At the height of his career, Hall was earning millions, but he confessed to spending hundreds of thousands on alcohol and pills. "I didn't have a drinking problem," he said once. "I had a stopping problem." By the early 2000s, he was broke, divorced, and alienated from his children. He appeared at independent wrestling shows visibly intoxicated, stumbling and slurring his words, maker installed, and spent years in and out of rehab. Then came a miracle. Diamond Dallas Page. Page, a fellow wrestler and friend, took Hall into his home, put him through yoga, rehab, and daily accountability. The transformation was real. Hall sobered up, repaired relationships, and even made it to the WWE Hall of Fame. But the years of abuse had already taken their toll. He passed away in 2022 after complications from hip surgery, clean, loved, but forever marked by the scars of the past. Scott Hall's story isn't just about addiction. It's about pain that never healed, an industry that enabled excess, and a man whose collapse was as dramatic and tragic as his personal unraveling. At the height of his career, during the peak of the Monday Night Wars, as a founding member of the NWO and WCW, he earned multi-million-dollar contracts, bonuses for pay-per-view appearances, merchandise royalties, and lucrative side deals. Estimates suggest he made over $5 million during his WCW tenure alone, not including his earlier WWF earnings as Razor Ramon. Yet, despite this immense wealth, Hall lost the vast majority of his fortune, not through poor investments or bad business decisions alone, but through the sheer, unrelenting cost of his addiction. He admitted to spending hundreds of thousands of dollars annually on alcohol, cocaine, and prescription painkillers, often buying drugs in bulk to fuel his habit. He once said, "I didn't spend it to every dollar he earned." Money flowed out as quickly as it came in, luxury cars were sold or repossessed, homes were foreclosed, and bank accounts were drained to fund his next binge. By the early 2000s, with his career in freefall and his health deteriorating, Hall was effectively broke. He couldn't secure steady work in major promotions, and when he did appear at independent shows, it was often for minimal pay, sometimes just a few $100s, because promoters knew he was unreliable. He was forced to sell memorabilia, including championship belts and rare collectibles, just to afford rent or medical bills. He filed for bankruptcy in the early 2000s, listing over $1 million in debts against assets worth a fraction of that amount. His divorce from his wife, which was finalized amid his lowest point, further drained his finances through legal fees and settlements. Health issues meant he was unable to capitalize on his legacy through endorsements, podcasts. He didn't die rich. He died having spent everything he had, not on luxury, but on a body that betrayed the man. Lex Luger was the ideal. The perfect physique. The all-American hero. With his chiseled frame and piercing stare, he looked like a comic book character come to life. WCW and WWF both marketed him as the next Hulk Hogan. He toured the country in a red, white, and blue bus, the Lex Express, shaking hands with fans, smiling for cameras, embodying the very image of success. But image was everything, and it was a fragile thing to live for. Behind the scenes, Luger was a man under pressure. He struggled with injuries, painkillers, and an increasing dependence on drugs to maintain the physical perfection that made him a star. His relationship with Miss Elizabeth, one of wrestling's most beloved figures, ended in tragedy when she died from an overdose in his home in 2003. The incident shattered him. Luger was arrested, vilified, and lost everything. Years later, while traveling, he suffered a spinal stroke that left him paralyzed from the neck down. For a man whose entire identity was built on his body, it was a devastating twist of fate. "I went from being the total package to being a total mess," he said. Luger lost his wealth, his fame, his freedom of movement, everything but his faith. Over the years, he found redemption through Christianity and became an advocate for spinal injury patients. He now travels to speak about health, faith, and perspective. His story is a sobering reflection on how quickly everything can vanish. One bad decision, one accident, one twist of fate, and the hero becomes the cautionary tale. But Luger's resilience, his ability to find meaning in tragedy, gives his fall a rare sense of grace. He's living proof that redemption doesn't require a comeback, only acceptance. Lex Luger's financial ruin was not the result of reckless spending or poor investments, it was the inevitable collapse of a man whose entire value system was built on a physical ideal that could not be sustained. At his peak, Luger was among the highest-paid stars in WCW and WWF. He commanded six-figure paychecks for major events, earned lucrative merchandise royalties as the total package, and even launched his own line of protein supplements and fitness gear. His red, white, and blue Lex Express bus wasn't just a gimmick, it was a rolling billboard for a brand that sold millions of dollars worth of products and appearances. But as his body broke down under the strain of years of intense training, steroid use, and injury, so too did his earning power. Painkillers, initially prescribed for herniated discs and joint damage, became dependencies. The same drugs that kept him in the ring eventually eroded his judgment, his discipline, and his ability to maintain the image that made him valuable. When Miss Elizabeth died in his home in 2003 from a drug overdose, the fallout was catastrophic. Though he was never criminally charged, the public perception shifted overnight. Sponsors fled. Promoters distanced themselves. His merchandise vanished from shelves. The total package had become a symbol of tragedy, not triumph. The arrest that followed, though ultimately dropped, was the death knell for his career. Media outlets painted him as a villain, and wrestling fans, once loyal, turned away. Appearances dried up. Endorsements evaporated. The Lex Express sat idle. By the time he was ready to return to the ring, the industry had moved on. The new generation of stars didn't need a washed-up bodybuilder, they needed high-flying athleticism and viral charisma. Luger's brand, once synonymous with American strength, was now associated with scandal and sorrow. Then came the spinal stroke in 2007, a devastating, life-altering event that left him paralyzed from the neck down. For a man who had built his identity on physical dominance, the loss of mobility was not just medical, it was existential. He could no longer work as a wrestler, make public appearances, sign autographs, or even drive himself to a speaking engagement. His ability to generate income, already crippled by reputation, was now physically impossible. Medical bills mounted. Insurance coverage was insufficient. His home was sold to pay for care. Retirement savings, once substantial, were depleted within years. Luger's net worth, once estimated in the multi-millions, now hovers around $300,000 to $400,000, a fraction of what he earned in his prime. Unlike Flair, who spent his fortune on champagne and jets, or Hall, who burned through cash on drugs and denial, Luger didn't lose his money, he lost the means to make it. His wealth was tied to his body, and when that body failed, so did his livelihood. Yet, in the silence of his wheelchair, Luger found a new voice. He began speaking at churches, rehabilitation centers, and youth programs, not as a champion, but as a man who had seen the abyss. He founded a non-profit to support spinal injury victims, using his story to raise awareness and funds. He no longer sells protein shakes, he sells hope. He doesn't tour the country on a luxury bus, he travels in a modified van, speaking to those who feel broken, telling them, you don't have to be perfect to be powerful. Lex Luger didn't lose his money because he was greedy. He lost it because he was human, and the industry that celebrated him never knew how to love him when he stopped being perfect. But in his fall, he became something rarer than a superstar. A testament to resilience. He didn't need a comeback. He needed to be seen, not for what he could do, but for who he was. And in that, he found something no fortune could ever buy. Perry Saturn, the forgotten soldier Perry Saturn, was never the biggest star, but among wrestlers, he was one of the most respected. A technician. A fighter. A man who took pride in realism and grit. Fans remember his wild eyes, his suplexes, his intensity. But few knew the pain beneath the surface, a pain that would one day drive him into oblivion. In 2004, Saturn performed an act of genuine heroism. Walking down the street, he saw two men assaulting a woman. He intervened, and was shot twice in the neck. He survived, but the bullets changed everything. Addicted to painkillers, suffering from brain trauma, and unable to work, Saturn's life spiraled into chaos. The man who once commanded arenas was now sleeping under bridges, addicted, forgotten. For years, no one knew where he was. Rumors circulated that he had died. But a friend, former WWE producer Dave Lagana, refused to give up. After months of searching, he found Saturn alive but barely hanging on. When he re-emerged in 2010, his appearance shocked fans, frail, bearded, haunted. I was gone, he said simply. Dead to the world. His road back was brutal but inspiring. With help from friends like Diamond Dallas Page, Saturn entered recovery and began piecing his life together. He spoke openly about addiction, mental health, and the importance of compassion. While he never regained his old fame, he found something more valuable: peace. Perry Saturn's life is a haunting example of how easily the industry forgets its soldiers. Once the applause fades, there's no safety net. His heroism saved a stranger's life, but nearly cost him his own. And yet, even in ruin, his story carries quiet dignity, proof that redemption doesn't always come with a spotlight. Perry Saturn's financial collapse was not the result of excess, it was the consequence of sacrifice, silence, and systemic neglect. Unlike the megastars who lived in mansions and flew private jets, Saturn was always a working-class wrestler, paid by the show, often on the road, living paycheck to paycheck even at his peak. He never signed million-dollar contracts or built a merchandise empire. His value was in his ability to elevate every match, to make the ordinary feel extraordinary, and that kind of labor rarely comes with long-term security. When he was shot twice in the neck in 2004 while intervening to save a woman from assault, he didn't just lose his health, he lost his livelihood. The bullets severed nerves, damaged his spinal cord, and caused permanent brain trauma. He was left with chronic pain, seizures, and cognitive impairment. The painkillers prescribed to manage his injuries quickly became a crutch, then a cage. With no health insurance from WWE, he had been released in 2001 after a contract dispute, and no union protections. Saturn had no safety net. Workers' compensation was denied. Disability claims stalled. He couldn't work. He couldn't even drive. What followed was a descent into homelessness. For nearly 6 years, Saturn vanished, sleeping under bridges in St. Louis, scavenging food, surviving on the kindness of strangers. He sold his wrestling gear, boots, tights, championship belts, just to buy food and medication. He stopped answering calls. He stopped caring if anyone remembered him. "I was gone," he later said. "Dead to the world." And in many ways, he was. The wrestling world moved on. New stars rose. The Attitude Era became nostalgia. Saturn's name was whispered only in fan forums, a ghost story for those who remembered the old ECW days. By the time his friend Dave Lagana found him in 2010, Saturn weighed less than 120 pounds. His teeth were rotting. His body was ravaged by infection and malnutrition. He had no bank account, no home, no ID, just a tattered backpack and a fading tattoo of a skull on his arm. The man who once terrified opponents with his suplexes and wild-eyed intensity was now a shadow, barely able to speak above a whisper. Recovery didn't restore his wealth, it barely restored his dignity. With help from Diamond Dallas Page and other wrestlers who pooled money for his medical bills, Saturn entered rehab. He underwent surgeries, received therapy, and slowly relearned how to walk, how to speak, how to trust again. But the financial damage was irreversible. He missed out on decades of wrestling nostalgia revenue, no Hall of Fame induction, no convention appearances, no YouTube deals, no podcast royalties. The industry that once celebrated his toughness never once asked how to support him after he was broken. Today, Saturn lives modestly in a small apartment, supported by a GoFundMe campaign started by fans and a handful of former colleagues. He occasionally speaks at mental health panels, sharing his story with raw honesty. He doesn't ask for money. He asks for awareness, for change. "I didn't get hurt in the ring," he says. "I got hurt trying to do the right thing. And no one was there to catch me when I fell." His net worth today is estimated at less than $10,000, a fraction of what a mid-carder makes in a single year today. He owns no property, no investments, no memorabilia collection, because he sold it all to survive. Yet, in a world where wrestlers are monetized the moment they step into a ring, Perry Saturn is the ultimate counterpoint, a man whose greatest act of courage cost him everything, and still, he never asked for payment. His story isn't about fame lost. It's about humanity ignored. The wrestling business rewards spectacle, but when the spectacle ends, and the blood dries, who pays for the silence? Perry Saturn didn't need a comeback. He needed a community. And in finding one, he became more than a wrestler, he became a warning, a beacon, and a quiet, unbreakable testament to the fact that some heroes don't wear capes. They just show up. And sometimes, the world doesn't notice until they're gone. Dave Bautista, the man who walked away. Dave Bautista's story begins where the others end, in self-destruction, but leads somewhere different, rebirth. Before he became the global movie star we know today, Bautista was another wrestling machine, muscles, power, dominance. As The Animal, he ruled WWE in the mid-2000s, earning millions and living large. But when he looked in the mirror, he saw a stranger. Bautista grew up in poverty, raised on the rough streets of Washington. Violence and survival shaped him. Before wrestling, he worked as a nightclub bouncer and bodyguard, jobs that led to multiple arrests for fighting. Fame didn't erase those instincts, it amplified them. He partied hard, spent recklessly, and went through divorce after divorce. His bank accounts bled faster than they filled. But somewhere in his late 30s, Bautista realized something few wrestlers do, that fame inside the ring is temporary, and that reinvention is survival. He walked away from WWE in 2010, turning down millions to pursue acting. It was a decision that baffled everyone. He was told he was too old, too muscular, too typecast. For 3 years, he was broke. He couldn't get roles. He sold his house. But he refused to go back. Then came Guardians of the Galaxy. Bautista's performance as Drax wasn't just a breakout, it was transformative. Critics praised his vulnerability and comedic timing. He wasn't just an action star, he was an actor. From Blade Runner 2049 to Dune, Bautista proved he could carry depth and emotion. His success wasn't luck, it was discipline. Unlike Flair or Hall, Bautista didn't cling to the persona that made him rich. He dismantled it, piece by piece, and built something real in its place. Today, he speaks openly about therapy, depression, and the pressure of fame. "I'm not The Animal," he said. "That was just a chapter. I'm Dave now." His journey stands as a rare example of evolution in an industry that often traps its stars in amber. He lost everything, then rebuilt his life from the ashes, not as a wrestler, but as a man. Dave Bautista's story is not just one of reinvention, it is a masterclass in conscious self-liberation, a rare triumph over the gravitational pull of fame that so often crushes those who wear it too long. And while his financial collapse in the early 2010s was as real and devastating as any of his peers, what sets him apart is not that he lost his money, it's that he chose to lose it. When Bautista walked away from WWE in 2010, he turned down a guaranteed $10 million contract renewal, a sum that would have secured him for life in wrestling terms. He also forfeited merchandising royalties, pay-per-view bonuses, and the steady income stream that came with being one of WWE's top draws. At the time, he was living in a $1.2 million home in Florida, driving luxury cars, and jet-setting between events and parties. But behind the facade, he was drowning. His marriages had crumbled. His relationships were fractured. He was medicated, emotionally numb, and terrified of waking up one day and realizing he'd spent his entire adult life playing a character he no longer recognized. "I was rich in dollars but poor in soul," he later said. He sold his house. He liquidated his assets, his cars, his watches, even his championship belts, to fund a 3-year stretch of near poverty while he auditioned for roles. He lived in a rented room in Los Angeles, surviving on ramen noodles and the kindness of friends. He took odd jobs, working construction, even cleaning houses, just to pay his bills. He applied for over 150 acting roles and was rejected nearly every time. Casting directors told him he was too big, too intimidating, not cinematic. One executive famously told him, "You're not an actor. You're a wrestler who looks like a truck." For years, he believed them. But Bautista didn't give up because he was desperate to return to fame. He gave up because he was desperate to become someone else, someone real. He began therapy. He confronted the childhood trauma of growing up poor in Washington, D.C., where violence was normalized and emotional expression was weakness. He studied acting techniques, took improv classes, read philosophy, and learned to sit with silence. He stopped seeing himself as the animal and started seeing himself as Dave, flawed, frightened, and capable of change. When he landed the role of Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, it wasn't a lucky break, it was the culmination of years of invisible labor. He didn't audition for the part, he became it. He brought to Drax the same raw vulnerability he'd spent years uncovering in himself, a man who didn't understand sarcasm, who spoke with brutal honesty, who carried grief like armor. The world saw a funny, muscular alien. Bautista saw a reflection of his own journey. The success that followed was seismic. Guardians, Blade Runner 2049, Dune, Spectre, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, Bautista didn't just appear in blockbusters, he anchored them. He earned over $10 million for Dune, Part 2 alone. He became one of Hollywood's most sought-after character actors, commanding respect not for his physique, but for his craft. And unlike Flair, Hall, Luger, or Saturn, Bautista didn't just survive his fall, he designed it. He didn't wait for the industry to rescue him. He didn't rely on charity, cameos, or nostalgia tours. He built a new empire, one based on discipline, emotional intelligence, and artistic integrity. Today, Bautista is worth an estimated $25 to $30 million. But more importantly, he owns something no amount of money can buy: peace. He lives quietly in a modest home, spends time with his daughter, and speaks openly about mental health, toxic masculinity, and the dangers of equating self-worth with fame. He has no plans to return to wrestling, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. "I don't miss the ring," he says. "I miss the person I had to become to survive it." His story is the antidote to the tragedies that came before. While others were consumed by their personas, Bautista dismantled his. While others chased the illusion of permanence, he embraced impermanence. While others clung to the past, he dared to build a future, not as a legend, but as a man. He didn't escape the spotlight. He outgrew it. And in doing so, he gave the wrestling world something it had never seen before, a man who walked away from everything, and became more than he ever was. Epilogue, The Ring never lets go. The stories of Flair, Hall, Luger, Saturn, and Bautista form a mosaic of triumph and tragedy. Each man reached unimaginable heights, and faced the same abyss when the cheers faded. Some were destroyed by excess, others by trauma, some by bad luck. Yet through their pain, they reveal a universal truth: in wrestling, the line between performance and reality disappears. The character becomes the person. And when the curtain falls, it's hard to remember who you really are. Ric Flair became trapped in his own legend. Scott Hall was haunted by a ghost from his past. Lex Luger's body betrayed his image. Perry Saturn's heroism led to his destruction. Dave Bautista burned down his identity and built a new one from the ashes. Their journeys are reminders that fame, without grounding, can be fatal, that wealth means nothing when you're fighting ghosts. But they're also reminders of resilience, of how even the fallen can rise, scarred but still standing. The squared circle is more than a stage, it's a mirror. It reflects the best and worst of those who enter it. For every hero who soars, another pays the price for keeping the illusion alive. And when the lights dim, and the crowd's roar fades into silence, all that's left is the man, stripped of gimmicks, searching for peace. Because in wrestling, as in life, the hardest fight always comes after the final bell.